Before the Industrial Revolution, people worked at home or on farms or in small workshops. Making clothes was done entirely by hand. Cotton was spun to thread or yarn on a spinning wheel. In the 1700s, people began buying more and more goods, so textile traders began to look for faster and cheaper ways of producing clothes. The first spinning machine came up in the early 18th century, and by 1780, spinning was done mostly in new factories where workers gathered.
Hello, I'm Carlos Boozer from TRJC TV Network. Tonight we're going to dig deeper into how factories affected the Industrial Revolution. Tonight's guest is Richard Wayne. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Carlos. Pleasure to be here.
So, Richard, where were these factories built?
The majority of the factories are built along rivers or wherever it's easiest to get fuel and resources to the factories.
Resources, what are those?
Resources are supplies needed to make the products in the factories.
How many factories were in operation at this time?
At the height of production, there were about 250,000 factories up and running.
What kind of factories were there?
There were three main types of factories: textile mills, ironworking, and steam power manufacturing.
About how many workers were there in each factory?
On average, there were around 800 workers in each factory.
What did they make in the factories, Richard?
Well, Carlos, let me tell you, there were many different kinds of factories. They processed metal for building things, they had textile mills where they made different types of clothes, and they manufactured steam engines for construction or farming purposes.
So, Richard, why were these factories made?
As the demands for British goods increased, merchants needed more cost-effective methods of production, which led to the rise of mechanization in the factory system.
How did this help out the people at this time?
Well, Carlos, the textile industry in particular was transformed by industrialization. Before mechanization and factories, textiles were made mainly in people's homes, with merchants providing the raw materials and basic equipment, and then picking up the finished product.
What about the iron industry, Richard?
Developments in the iron industry enlightened Abraham Darby discovered a cheaper, easier method to producing cast iron, using a coke-fueled furnace. In the 1850s, British engineer Henry Bessemer developed the first inexpensive process for mass-producing steel, both iron and steel, because essential materials used to make everything from appliance tools and machines to ships, buildings, and infrastructure.
What kind of impact did this have on the citizens who lived and worked around the factories?
It gave the people around the factories an opportunity to get jobs and work in the factory.
So tell me, Richard, what were the pros and cons of the factory system?
There were many differences from factory to factory, but they were the same system as far as how they operated.
So let's start with the pros.
Some good things about the factory system were that it provided many jobs for people. This led to better employment rates and a better overall economy for the people living in the city.
Was there anything else good about the factory system?
Why, yes, Carlos. It pushed production rates of goods through the roof. There was so much more manufacturing going on with the factory system than ever before. This made products cheaper to be manufactured and sold at a lower price.
What about the bad things, Richard? Tell me about the bad things.
Well, first off, they had very unclean working conditions, always stumbling over things and risking falling into machines. The working conditions were unsafe because there were no safety guards on the machines, because that would just be another expense for the factory to pay for.
What else was bad about the factory system?
They had to work harsh hours. Women and children worked nearly 60 hours a week, getting very poorly paid. The workers were treated with disrespect by the employers because all they cared about was putting out goods to be sold.
So, Richard, now that we know all about this info about the factories, what exactly was the Industrial Revolution?
Well, Carlos, that is a very broad term. Let me break it down for you. The Industrial Revolution was the name given the movement in which machines changed people's way of life as well as their methods of manufacture.
Wow, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Haha, okay. The Industrial Revolution took place in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was a period which predominantly agrarian rural societies in Europe and America became industrial and urban. Before the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing was usually done in people's homes.
Wait, in people's homes? How does that work?
Yes, in people's homes. They were hired by the owner of the company, providing them with the resources to make the products.
Oh, okay. Go on, Richard.
Yes, they used hand tools and basic machines. Industrialization marked a shift to power, special purpose machines, factories, and mass production of everyday products.
Wow, Richard, that was interesting. Thanks for being on the show with us, and we hope you come back sometime soon.
It was a pleasure, Carlos. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. From the man himself, Richard Wayne. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks again for watching TRJC TV Network. Just kidding, folks. There's one more thing to suffer through.
The brief summary of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution took place from the 18th to 19th centuries. It was a period during which predominantly agrarian rural societies in Europe and America became industrial and urban. Before the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing was usually done in people's houses with hand tools and basic machines. Industrialization made a shift to powered special purpose machinery, factories, and mass production. Just think, you could still be doing this stuff at your own house.
So, Richard, what was life like for factory workers?
Well, Carlos, the two biggest problems with the factory system were dangerous working conditions and very low pay. Women and children would routinely work 50 hours a week, earning about 10 cents an hour.
Wow, that's a very low pay rate.
No kidding. Most factories wouldn't even let anyone leave until they were searched for stolen goods in their pockets.
Doesn't seem like they had much respect for the workers.
No, they really didn't. Factories rarely kept any records of the age of children and adults who worked for them. As employment in the cities could be difficult to get, many people did lie about their age. Some factories would go to orphanages to get workers, so if any died, they could easily replace them.
How were the factory workers dressed?
Factories were run for straight profit. Any form of machine safety guard cost money. As a result, there were no safety guards.